Okay, so most players believe that the key skills in Warhammer 40,000 are things like screening, math hammer, even movement. And all of these skills are very important for winning a game, but they're not actually the skill that determines who wins games. The real skill that's going to be separating your strong players from everybody else is critical thinking. And the problem is, most players never train it. Now, the good news is that simply by playing Warhammer 40,000, you are training your critical thinking skills. And this is a skill that will take you so far in life, in every aspect of life. I don't care if it's your job. I don't care if it's your relationships. I don't care if you're trying to sell a presentation. I don't care if you're trying to be a politician. If you sharpen your critical thinking skills, you will become a better human. And Warhammer 40,000 is the perfect playground for developing this critical, and I do in fact mean critical skill in life. So the common misconception that people have in life is they're focusing on things like list building, they're focusing on tactics, combinations, they're focusing on developing, rules, knowledge, but they're treating those as if they're answers instead of learning how to ask better questions. It's not about, do I need to cause more damage to my opponent? It's about, do I need to kill my opponent at all? Remember, guys, Warhammer 40,000 is unlike TCG. It's unlike your trading card games. It's unlike actually a lot of other games out there. We don't play on a health point system. You don't win the game because your opponent runs out of health points or your opponent runs out of units. You win the game based off victory points, which is actually very different from a lot of very, very popular games. So you have a different win condition in Warhammer 40k. So what you have to think about is all these things that we've listed here: screening, your math hammer, your movement, your list building, your matchups. All of these things are tools that we're going to be utilizing to win, but you actually have to engage your critical thinking skills in order to be able to use these tools. And that is what's really, really, really relevant. So let's ask ourselves some questions here. Sorry, I just hit that. Let's talk about the real skill that we have, which is critical thinking. This is basically you're turning information into decisions. So a good player is going to be asking some very interesting questions here. And what they're going to be asking you is going to look a lot like, I'm sorry, that was the wrong. A good player is going to ask you things like, what is actually going to be winning this game? What is my opponent actually trying to accomplish? What decisions are going to punish me the most that I make? What happens if my plan fails? What is the real objective this turn? While your average players will be asking things such as, oh, can I kill this unit? Or what stratum should I be using? How much damage do I have to do here? And while these aren't not necessarily bad questions, they're good questions to be asked. They have to be asked under a certain concept, under a certain conception. So let me give you a really, really good framework here to start improving your critical thinking skills. I no longer want you focusing too much on how do you destroy X unit. Like everyone's asking the question, how do I kill a Satan? How do I kill a Norn emissary when they're on an objective? How do I kill Deathwing Knights? And that's what everyone's focusing on. But the answers to those are actually really easy. Like if you see something that has toughness 11 and it's got a 4-pin vulnerable save, you need something with strength 12, or you need high volume lethal hits, and you need a lot of it to go through. Like that's what you need to kill. Those answers to those questions, while it's important you have the answers are actually really simple, and many times we just overthink those questions. So instead, here's what I want you asking. I want you asking much more relevant questions. I want you asking, how do you win Warhammer? And here's the framework that I want everyone to take away for forever. This is gold here, okay? The way you win Warhammer is very simple. You create a victory point differential. The reason why I say a victory point differential is because it doesn't matter if you score 100 victory points. It doesn't matter if you only score 11 victory points. As long as your opponent only scored 10, you won. Now, there's only 4 ways that you can create said victory point differential in the game. And this is where our critical thinking skills come into play. We have to identify what these skills are. And some of you may have heard this before, but you need to hear it again, because the more that you get this, the better you're going to get at the game, the better you're going to be able to create your own methods of winning the game, okay? There's only 4 ways that we can create this victory point differential. It is scoring primary, denying primary, scoring secondaries, and denying secondaries. That's it. There's no other way to create victory point differential, unless you include like someone cheating and getting a yellow card, but that's not under our control, so we are not going to be worrying about that. That's just not what we're really going to be super concerned with, okay? So When we ask ourselves these questions, what we realize is we are creating a game plan. Now, what is a game plan? A game plan is simply the tactics and strategies that you uniquely use to create this victory point differential. That is how we actually have to think about the game. So, if you guys have seen my videos on how I run my Dark Angels list, I'll go through this really, really complex explanation. I'll be like, well, I'm going to deploy my scouts in a position that will allow my turn 1 deep striking Deathwing Knights to drop down adjacent to my opponent's natural expansion so that I can touch that natural expansion, forcing my opponent to go full send into my Deathwing Knights turn 1. If they want to shoot them, I don't care, because I don't care if you shoot -1 to wound, armor attempt, and, in cover Deathwing Knights. And if you want to charge into them, then I'm going to rapid ingress and heroic and rapid ingress and then heroic intervene with the Lionel Johnson. This is a lot of words. It's very complex, and I've got other things that are set up in the army. But people get distracted and they think that, oh, your game plan is always this super, super complicated thing. But critical thinking doesn't have to be complex. All of those things that I just said are simply tactics and strategies that I utilize to achieve my goal. My goal is to score primary and deny primary. And if you guys know anything about me, I really don't care about secondaries. As a matter of fact, I think most of the time, scoring secondaries and denying secondaries, or at least focusing on those two things, is the things that make you lose the game. So I really like to focus on scoring primary and denying primary because it has a higher bang for its buck on it. So your critical thinking comes into play when you're trying to determine how best can your army score the primary and deny the primary, and score the secondaries and deny the secondaries if that's what you choose to focus on, utilizing your army. So this is how I want you guys to start thinking about the game. We're going to engage our brains to go to another order of thinking beyond how do I kill X unit to how do I create the victory point differential that is required to win the game. When you start doing this, you start understanding why I say on here, I'm like, if you're struggling with Satan, take your 55-point unit of Rangers and put it on the same objective as the Satan. When you do that, the Satan do not score primary. Yes, guys, by the way, this is not a comment on, like, what army is best. I know Eldar aren't that great right now, and I know Necrons are probably still a little too good. I understand these things. But when we're trying to solve problems and we want to use our tactics and our strategies that are uniquely available to our army, we have to think about how to utilize them to get to the end goal. And the end goal is not killing that Satan. That's why you guys keep bashing your heads into walls. The end goal is to create a victory point differential. So if we use our abilities to create this victory point differential, we're going to get so much further in the game. Now, one of the really cool things is that this is just fundamentally true. This is a fundamentally true statement that will be fundamentally true in every single edition of Warhammer. Because no matter what, the goal is always going to be to create this victory point differential. The only thing that could possibly change that is if in a future edition of Warhammer, we move away from a victory point system and we move into a health point system, which is like, and by health point, I would also be referencing like, hey, you table your opponent, you win. Similar to how like, how the old world used to be back in the day when it was still Warhammer Fantasy Battles. So that was more of like a health point system. It's like, hey, whoever killed more of the opponent's enemies, of the opponent's army is the winner. But that's not how we play Warhammer anymore. So instead, we're going to use our critical thinking skills to come up with the tactics and strategies that are going to establish the goal of creating this victory point differential. And the 4 mechanisms that we're going to do that through is going to be primary control, primary denial, secondary control, or secondary scoring, I suppose, and secondary denial. It's really important that we all grasp this. Do you get it? If you don't, please type it down into the comments down below, and I'll see if I can explain this a better way for you guys. All right, so let's talk about why this type of critical thinking is very challenging to come up with, to do, and why I really, really want to encourage you guys to start developing these skills to actually see the bottom line here. It's hard because it requires you to slow down a little bit, and it requires you to ignore the obvious, like, tiger that's in front of you. It requires you to question assumptions, and it really requires you to accept uncertainty. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to recognize that the common assumptions in the game are not necessarily the ones that will lead us to success, right? The common assumptions would have you say, hey, if there is a giant brick wall in front of you, you need to tear it down. Or if there's a big Satan in front of you, you need to kill it. But that is going to lead you through a path of frustration and relying on dice a lot of times. So what I highly recommend is engage your critical think skills and figure out instead of having to bash that brick wall down, how do you go around it? How do you go underneath it? How do you go over it? How do you just like, I don't know, put some like reroute a water stream below the brick wall to make it crumble? You know, like this is what I want you to start thinking about. I want you to utilize your abilities, challenge the assumptions that you have. The assumption is, oh, I can't win this matchup because of X factor. Well, how do you circumvent X factor? There are a lot of things in this game that allow you to utilize your own creative thought process to solve problems. There are a lot of detachments in this game that have tools that are incredible. I'm actually going to be doing a video on some of these next week, and I'll be doing them with 40k Dirtbag, Derek from 40k Dirtbags, and we'll be going through how to actually utilize your critical thinking skills to increase the power of some, or properly utilize some of the perceived as bad detachments in the game that are actually quite good. These are things that we have to do, okay? All right, so let me talk a little bit about what strong players are really doing on the board. So we've already identified the win conditions of the game, and that is going to be creating a victory point differential. And the best way to create a victory point differential, in my opinion, is via scoring primary and denying primary. Now, for my opponent, for some people will say they really like to focus on scoring secondary, denying secondary. I tend to ignore that stuff because they're worth less points. But what other strong players always do is we're constantly evaluating the board state. We're constantly evaluating our opponent's incentives to do certain things. Like, for example, if I have a combi lieutenant hanging out in the middle, my opponent is incentivized to come and kill that combi lieutenant. But they're also incentivized to do it from 9.1 inches away, because if they move within 9 inches, that combi lieutenant will then reactive move away into safety, right? So when I see the board state, I see what my opponent is incentivized to do. I understand what I have to do in order to like achieve some mission scoring, right? And when I achieve mission scoring, the way I do that is via primary scoring and primary denial. So a lot of people don't understand that when good players are evaluating the table, what they're not doing is they're not necessarily playing their army. They're really just solving the game states. So here's a practical way to start improving your natural ability to, what do you call it? Improve your critical thinking skills. Before every turn, what I want you to start asking yourself is, what actually wins this game? Do I win the game because I killed that unit of Sanguinary Guard? Because they're in front of you. They're scary. They're shiny. You wanna get them. You wanna step on them. But does that actually win? Then you're gonna ask yourself, what is my opponent really trying to do next turn? Are they actually trying to get me to charge that Sanguinary Guard? Because if I do charge the Sanguinary Guard, then he gets to obliterate me with his Blade Guard veterans that are currently led by a Sanguinary Priest. Oh, that's so cool. Is that what's gonna happen? Then you're gonna ask yourself, what decision gives you the most control on the board? What decision gives you the most control? When you ask these style of questions, this is going to improve your ability to flex your mind and engage those critical thinking skills. That's a very, very powerful thing. All right, so here's a little final thought here. Warhammer is not just a game of models and dice. It is a game of decisions. And when you master the concepts of decisions, what you're going to notice is not only are you going to become a much better Warhammer 40,000 player, you're also going to become much better at every single aspect of your life. If you want to improve at 40k, don't just learn more tricks. Learn to think more clearly about the game. It's not a game of models and dice. It's a game of decisions. Guys, hopefully you found this useful. You hope that you found this helpful. Until next time, crump on. Bye-bye.